so excited that you're here. And the person who was going to interview Liz today was Liz's editor and my longtime friend Susan Camel, who got in a sort of a plane situation today and couldn't come at the last possible minute. And I'm really sorry because I was looking forward to seeing her, but I'm also really glad because I would rather talk to you, Liz. So would you read for a minute and then we'll talk?
Okay, I will. And first of all, thank you everybody for being here. I'm just going to read just a couple of pages. It's not the very beginning, but it's toward the beginning, where Lucy Barton is in a hospital and she's been estranged from her mother. And her mother's never been on a plane before, and Lucy looks up and her mother's sitting at the foot of the bed. So I'm just going to have a little bit of the conversation that they start with. Was it scary getting a taxi, Mom? She hesitated, and I felt that I saw the terror that must have visited her when she stepped off the plane. But she said, I have a tongue in my head, and I used it. After a moment, I said, I'm really glad you're here. She smiled quickly and looked toward the window. This was the middle of the 1980s, before cell phones, and when the beige telephone next to my bed rang, and it was my husband, my mother could tell, I'm sure, by the pitiful way I said hi, as though ready to weep, my mother would quietly rise from her chair and leave the room. I suppose during those times she found food in the cafeteria or called my father from a payphone down the hall, since I never saw her eat, and since I assumed my father wondered over her safety. There was no problem, as far as I understood it, between them. And after I had spoken to each child, kissing the phone mouthpiece a dozen times, then lying back onto the pillow and closing my eyes, my mother would slip back into the room, for when I opened my eyes, she would be there. That first day, we spoke of my brother, the eldest of us 3 siblings, who, unmarried, lived at home with my parents, though he was 36, and of my older sister, who was 34, and who lived 10 miles from my parents, with 5 children and a husband. I asked if my brother had a job. He has no job, my mother said. He spends the night with any animal that will be killed the next day. I asked her what she had said, and she repeated what she had said. She added, he goes into the Petersons' barn and he sleeps next to the pigs that will be taken to slaughter. I was surprised to hear this, and I said so, and my mother shrugged. Then my mother and I talked about the nurses. My mother named them right away. Cookie, for the skinny one who was crispy in her affect. Toothache, for the woebegone older one. Serious child, for the Indian woman we both liked. But I was tired, and so my mother started telling me stories of people she had known years before. She talked in a way I didn't remember, as though a pressure of feeling and words and observations had been stuffed down inside her for years, and her voice was breathy and unself-conscious. Sometimes I dozed off, and when I woke, I would beg her to talk again. But she said, oh, Wizzledy, you need your rest. I am resting. Please, Mom, tell me something. Tell me anything. Tell me about Kathy Nicely. I always loved her name. Oh, yes, my mother said, Kathy Nicely. Goodness, she came to a bad end.
Thank you. This book is going to debut on the New York Times list in the #1 position, which is so exciting and so well-deserved. Everything about this is a thrill. All right, so this is not my first question, but when you were reading that part, it's the thing I always think about. How do you write a book with cell phones? Do you feel this need to set this book in a time before cell phones and easy communication with people? Because that's such a plot killer.
Exactly. I did. I started it with it in that time period. And then I realized, oh, all right, I'm just going to have to say, this was in the 1980s and there were no cell phones. I'll just say it. So I said it. I mean, I had Lucy say it.
But I'm trying to remember in the Burgess Boys, when was that? Did they have cell phones?
They did have cell phones,
They did have cell phones.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But hopefully they were just turned off some of the time. I find it such a problem when people have full access to one another and all information to move plots forward.
Right. Right. I remember in the Burgess Boys, Bob kept his cell phone on his chest in the last scene in case his brother needed him. He kept it on vibrate, and it didn't vibrate.
Okay, so you made something beautiful out of the cell phone thing. And what year does Olive Kittredge end? Does it end in a pre-cell phone world? Does she
No,
ever get a
I mean
phone?
it goes well. No, it goes.
See,
through,
if I'd had more time, I would have done my
no, it's
homework
okay.
to see who
It
had
goes
the
through
cell phone.
9/11.
Okay.
But she doesn't have a cell phone.
She's just not the type.
Olive's not going to have a cell phone.
Yeah, that's
What
true.
would she do with a cell phone?
What would she do with a cell phone? Okay, this is
And
my...
and her son even says when she comes to New York, "Why can't you get a cell phone like everyone else?" And she doesn't say anything, which is amazing.
Okay, so this is my first question,
Okay.
and this is the question that really we could just throw everything away and only talk about this question. My favorite sentence is in the book is when Lucy is talking about staying at school, and she says, "That was when I learned that work gets done if you simply do it." Which, when I read this book months and months ago, I wrote that down, and I thought that's really all you ever need to say to anyone about anything.
Right. Right.
When did you discover that in your own life? Not
Right.
talking about the character or anything, and then talk about it in terms of the character, but talk about that sentence just in terms of your life.
I remember writing that sentence. I don't remember writing every sentence, but I remember writing that sentence. And I'm not sure where it came from. I think it just came from an understanding at my age that work gets done if you just do it. I remember we had a neighbor years ago, and he painted his apartment. And I said, "Wow, you painted your apartment?" He said, "There's no magic to it." And I realized he's right. He's absolutely right. And so it was that kind of thing. You just do it.
I was thinking it would be so great to start an MFA program, and people would come, and then you would just say to them, "Work gets done if you just do it," and then they could all go back.
They could go back
And they
home.
would save all of that money
they'd
in
save so much money.
2 years of their life.
And yeah, a lot of them probably wouldn't do it. And that's okay. Why do it if you don't need to?
And why encourage more people to do this? But is writing a tortured thing for you, or are you somebody who can say, I'm just going to sit down and do it?
I just do it. I just sit down and do it. It's my job. It's my vocation. It's what I do. It's what I've always done. And I just do it. And it's like any other job. There are good days and there are bad days. And the bad days sometimes can be really bad. You know, you get just so frustrated because I can feel that I'm not getting the sentence into the crevice that I need to get it into. And that's a very frustrating feeling. But, you know, it passes, like most things. And then, so it's not torture for me to write.
What did you do before? What did you do to make money before you made money doing this?
I did everything, actually. I did, you name it, I did it. I was a waitress. I was a cocktail waitress. I was a secretary. I worked in a department store. I was a lawyer for 6 months.
You know, I remembered there was something, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
I love that. I was a cocktail waitress. I worked in a department store. I was a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because usually you don't hear those in one sentence with equal weight. Yeah.
They were all equally dreadful, actually.
So you really only worked as a lawyer for 6 months?
Yes, I really did.
Did you have a lot of debt?
I had a little bit of debt. I didn't have nearly the debt that they have these days.
Okay.
I did have some debt, and I was able to pay it off rather early on.
I just wrote a character who drops out of law school in her third year, and she's destroyed by the debt of.
Yeah.
So when people say, I was a lawyer,
the debt
it didn't work out.
terrible these days, just terrible. No, I was an awful lawyer.
What kind of awful lawyer were you?
Well,
We're going to get back to the book, but I find this so interesting.
I was the kind of lawyer I wanted to be if I wanted to be a lawyer. I worked at Legal Aid in Syracuse, and I was in charge of what they then referred to as the developmentally disabled unit. And so I believed in my work, is what I'm saying. And I had clients, and I would, have to go in front of administrative law judges and fight for their rights, and I was just awful. I was awful at it, and I felt terrible about it.
That's so interesting.
It wasn't.
No. Well, I guess therein lies the problem.
Yeah,
right?
it was horrifying. And I came home one day and I realized, because when I was a waitress, I'd always wanted to be a writer, and I always knew I was a writer, and I always wanted to write. But when I left college, nobody cared. I couldn't get a nibble from any story that I sent out anywhere. And so then I was waitressing and cocktail waitressing at night so I could write during the day. And I had this feeling that it was 58. In my mind, I thought, if I'm 58 years old and I'm a cocktail waitress and I've never published anything, that will be so depressing. So I went to law school. And because I had a social conscience, and I thought, well, I can I can write at night. So misinformed. It was just such a, Anyway, so I went to law school, and I dropped out, and I went back, and I failed the bar, and I passed the bar, and all that foolishness. And then I was finally a lawyer, and I was just so bad at it. And I remember coming home and standing in the backyard and thinking to myself, okay, I can probably be a bad lawyer for the rest of my life, or I can just go for it. And I was thinking about dying, and I thought, if I die, when I die, if I have been a 58-year-old cocktail waitress, unpublished, that sounds pretty dignified to me, I thought.
And so is that when you wrote Amy and Isabel?
No, it took me about 20 more years to write that. But I made that decision that I was going for it.
It didn't take you 20 more years. Is that possible?
Well, let's see. I was 27. I was 43. No, it wasn't. It was whatever 43 minus 27 is.
14.
14? Is it 14? Whatever. It took me that long.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I have to put my glasses on because I can't read my own handwriting, and I scrawled this on the top of the paper. All right, this is another sentence I wanted to talk to you about, and this is when Lucy is taking a writing class with the character Sarah Payne, who is
Right.
wonderful. And it says, after that, Sarah talked a lot to the class about judging people and about coming to the page without judgment.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think of a good way to say what your theme is, because I believe for all of us, once we have a body of work, a group of novels, we have a theme where, there's a way in which we just write the same thing over and over again. And I was thinking a lot of what your books seem to me to be about is the suspension of judgment.
That's interesting.
That you, as a writer, are
Right.
not judging your characters. And in a lot of ways, it's about they're judging people or they're
Right.
not judging people.
Right. Right.
It's about Bob not judging. It's about Olive
Right.
judging.
Right.
But it's
Right.
really a lot about the
Interesting.
kind
Right.
of conflict
Right.
center of judgment.
Right.
So
That's interesting.
talk about that.
Well, I think probably in real life I'm as judgmental as anybody else. But when I do write, one of the most freeing things about writing, one of the reasons I like to write so much, is that I don't judge my characters. I love my characters. I just love every single person I've ever written.
And it really shows.
And I don't judge them. And every so often I get, like I remember with Olive, I remember one night looking at what I'd written that day, and I thought, she's behaving pretty badly. And I thought, oh, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do that. And then I remember thinking, no, you let her go, let her be Olive, let her rip. And so, but I loved her, so it wasn't skin off my teeth, so to speak. But I let her go, knowing that she was behaving badly. And so for me, I've always loved that part of writing, of just letting, I don't care what they do.
But it's really rare to you. It is sort of your hallmark and what makes your work specifically yours and so special. Because I think that a lot of people, obviously, loads of people write about horrible people.
Right.
Or just bad, cranky people.
Right.
But there is inherent judgment from the writer.
Right.
How do you feel about Flannery O'Connor?
Oh, that's interesting. I like her. But now that you're saying that, she's judgmental.
I feel like
That's
she's such a
interesting.
brilliant writer, sentence to sentence, so wonderful, but I can't stand her fiction.
That's interesting.
Because she brings so much, not just judgment, but she hates her characters. She hates the people that she writes
Sometimes she
about.
does. You're right. You're
And it
right.
really-
That's interesting.
it bugs
That's very
me.
interesting because I do like her, and yet I understand now why I don't pick her book up all the time, like I do others.
I will read her nonfiction, Mystery and Manners, that little thin book about religion that came out, her Diary to God. You know, I think that's really beautiful.
Right.
But A Good Man is hard to find.
Yeah,
Gives
I
me the
like that
creeps.
story.
It's a brilliant story. It's a brilliant piece of work. Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right. The other thing I really want to talk about is the first person.
Yeah. This is the only piece of work that I've done in the first person, and that was frightening for me. It was daunting for me. And the reason is, you know, I love different points of view. I love having an omniscient narrator that can go from one person's head into another person's head, hopefully seamlessly, so you know they don't feel too jarred. But I really have always loved that because I love the idea that we don't really know anybody else, and that in fiction we can sort of maybe get a sense of what it might feel like to be somebody else, and that's always had a real tug on me for my writing, and the point of view part of that has just always been so wonderful for me. And with the first person narrator, we're only going to see it from her eyes, and that feels limiting. And it also, I was afraid of maybe the reader would feel stuck in the head of Lucy and think, I don't want to be in this head. You know, where's another head to be in? And there wouldn't be. But then when I realized that it was written retrospectively, and that helped distance it, so that I hopefully the reader doesn't feel like, you know, they're knocking around inside her head too much.
Was it easier for you to write in first person?
Once I gave myself over to it, it wasn't easier. It wasn't easier, but it wasn't harder. But I had to get over that leap. I had to let myself do it, and I didn't want to, because when I was started to write parts of Lucy, like I write little drafts, so I write little sketches, and I just write them by hand, and I have them all over the desk, and I make a huge mess, and they just circulate and circulate, and there were other pieces of other stories and things that I thought would be more interesting to me, but Lucy kept showing back up. And so I realized that I had to pay attention to it, and I also realized it was a tonal thing, that her voice was particular, and that I had to either throw her off the desk or deal with it.
What happened to the rest of it? The parts that weren't Lucy?
Oh, I have no idea.
I mean, do they go someplace else?
Oh,
all
they
those
just go in the
pages?
garbage.
They go in the garbage.
Yeah,
okay, I respect
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
The book has such an incredible immediacy, and I feel like you, my friend, you know, are grabbing me by the wrist and saying, almost at a party, like, come into the bathroom, I have to tell you this right now, I can't wait one more second.
Right.
We have to talk about this right now. And that's really how I read the book. You know, I couldn't stop.
Good.
And I was wondering, can you get that in third person? I always avoid first person, and this book has really made such an impact on me. I swear the next book I write is going to be in first person because of this. But I feel like first person is cheating. You know, like it's easy. And that's why I always...
It's not easy.
It's not easy. I mean, you've shown such complexity in this.
Yeah, it's not easy, first person. I would actually say third person is, generally speaking, easier for me. But like I said, once I found the voice and I let myself do it, then it unfolded. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the problems with writing a first-person book about a character who turns out to be a writer,
yeah, I know, that was the worst,
is that people are going to think that it's you.
Yeah.
And I find this really fascinating because I don't actually think it's you, but you're playing with our consciousness. You're playing with sort of the American collective drooly reality show beast that says, I want everything to be true.
Right. And the fact that Lucy Barton is a writer, I mean, if I thought that writing in first person was, going to be a problem, well, the fact that she turned out to be a writer was really a problem. Because I didn't want to write about a writer. I mean, no offense, I don't think writers are all that interesting.
No,
I just
not really.
on the page there's not that much drama for a writer, really. I mean, but when I looked and I realized, Lucy is very, very poor in her youth. She's terribly poor, and she stays at school in order to be warm. And not only does she learn that work gets done when you do it, but she begins to read. And when I looked over my notes, or not notes, but scraps of drafts, and I realized that I had written the books, she writes, the books brought me things. They made me feel less alone. And that's when I realized, okay. All right, Lucy's going to be a writer. And that was also very daunting for me to do that. But I did.
and
I went for it.
And you're dealing with it, and it's all fine.
Yeah. Dealing with what? People thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Do you care about that sort of thing?
At first I sort of did, but I don't. No, I don't really actually care. I mean, Lucy's Lucy. She's Lucy. She came from my imagination, and yet she feels very real to me. And I'm not Lucy, but I love her. So
Well, you're not Olive, and you love her.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Did you? Were there books like this? By which I mean that sort of very direct address, short, first-person novels. Were there books that you read? Well, when I finished this book, the first thing I did was I read The Good Soldier again, which I hadn't read since I was in college.
Oh yeah, I read that recently again for. I had read. I think I read that 3 times. Why? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't everything I was remembering that it was.
Exactly.
It's good.
Exactly.
You should read The Good Soldier. Yeah,
but that's so interesting that you reread. Yeah, I read that a few years ago.
But it's sort of like this book drove me there. And I really have been thinking about books like True Grit, So Long, See You Tomorrow. But
interesting.
Because it's not just about the first person, it's also about the length.
Right.
And the directness.
Right. But to me that all came from her voice. It's all the sound of it. For me, it was the sound of her voice that I realized was going to convey the story to the reader, and I had to listen and get the sound of her voice right. And when I could do that, then it unfolded. And I think that she has a light touch. And so I think there's a porousness to the book in a way. Mm-hmm. It's not dense like the Burgess Boys is pretty tightly woven. I mean, it has to be. That's the nature of that story. But so I think that a reader can bring a lot of their own experiences to this book, as they do to any book anyway. But
this is so true. And one of the questions I have here is talk about negative space on the page. We know what it means in art, but this book is so much about white space and about what's left out. And there are 2 sentences that I wrote down. One was she's having a conversation with her mother, and her mother says something that really surprises her. And she said, "I felt the hot, cold shock that comes from being struck without warning." So you never talk about her being struck. But in that sentence, that's as much as you tell us about physical violence in her life. And then the other one that I just love, when she says, "Oh, corn of my youth, you were my friend." She's looking at a field of corn just coming up. "Oh, corn of my youth, you were my friend." You don't need to say anything else about her loneliness except that. Yeah. That's a tremendous use of white space and of breath and room and letting the reader come in. Did you read Jackie Woodson's book, Brown Girl Dreaming?
No.
I'll get that for you tonight when we're at the store.
Okay.
Brown Girl Dreaming, friends. Amazing, amazing book. It's a middle school book.
Oh, nice.
But it's
How lovely.
it's astonishing the way she
Yeah.
brings people in. So was that something that you were really going for? I mean, it's like War and Peace in 180 pages.
It wasn't conscious. It's not like I sit and think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make use of everything that's not there. I don't think that. I just write it. But I do take particular care to listen to the voice and to have it written true to her voice. That's what it has to be. It has to be true to her voice every step of the way. And then it will be what it is.
Is there a difference, and I think for me there is, in being true to the character, which you are in third person, and true to the voice, which you are in first person?
Right. Well, in first person, it is the voice. It is the voice. in third person, you have the narrative voice, so you have the narration that has its own sound, which will bring you the story. But in first person, it's just absolutely direct. It's right there with the character is the voice.
And I feel like in third person, it's kind of you're the narration in a way. You're the sensibility. You're the God.
Right. Exactly.
But in the first person, you're really tapping into that character.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the Burgess Boys, there's a mother and a daughter having a conversation.
Right.
That seem in the sort of rhythm of the conversation like Lucy and her mother. And I was wondering if there was any part of you that wrote that and thought, oh, that's good. I'd like to do a whole book like that. It's
the prologue of the Burgess Boys, and most people forget that it's there by the end of the book, which is fine. But I wrote that just one day as an exercise, kind of, and I wasn't at all sure that I would use it. But then I began to I sort of like the idea of playing with the sense of a narrator. It's sort of like the writer is saying, hi, this is me, I'm a writer, and I'm talking to my mother, and we're going to talk about the Burgess kids all the time. And then I'm going to say, well, I'm going to write about the Burgess kids and do it. And so that was, it was fun for me. That was appealing to me. But I didn't remember until after I wrote Lucy that I had done that.
Oh, how weird.
Yeah, it was weird.
Wow. Because, of course, when I was reading Lucy, I was thinking, you must have really...
obviously, it was in me there, but I didn't know that.
And I wonder also, because I just read the Q&A you did with Entertainment Weekly in which you talked about loving Madame Bovary. And that's a Madame Bovary thing. When we were in school, we knew this boy.
Yes, exactly.
And then that narrative never comes back again.
Exactly. It's people don't really remember that about Madame Bovary. That it starts in the first person.
Madame Bovary.
Yeah. No, you do.
I used to teach Madame Bovary.
Oh, really?
Madame Bovary is one of those books that I could, throw up in the air, and wherever it hit on the floor, I could do the class.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's an amazing book. But you're absolutely right. It always was so interesting to me that he did that.
But do you feel?
And Ralph does it all the time. Ralph does so much. He has so much fun with narrators. He just has a wonderful time with them.
I love him.
Yeah, I do too. And I reread a lot of his Zuckerman books when I was writing Lucy, to just see how he played with narration.
Did you think about the story of Lucy Galt? Because I know also you're a big William Trevor fan.
No, I adore William Trevor. I didn't think of that as I was writing it, no.
The only reason that I mentioned it is when I was reading The Galley, and I would think, what is that book I'm reading? It's the story of Lucy Galt. I kept just transposing the titles in my mind. And then when I saw that you were a big William Trevor fan, I was wondering if that was a nod or something.
I think Lucy Galt was one of the 2 books I ever reviewed.
I feel like this is sort of like analysis, Did you remember that book? Did you think about that book? It's analysis in a good way. Okay, these are the things that are on the first 4 pages, and I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. She looks out the hospital window onto the sidewalk and feels this sense of gratitude because she knows that someday that she'll be on the sidewalk and that she'll have that gratitude. She talks at the first 4 pages of this book. She talks about the doctor who's so kind and she loves him and she's grateful. She talks about the friend with no children. She talks about her husband who's very, very busy and can't come and visit her and is afraid of the hospital. She talks about great loneliness, and then her mother arrives.
Yeah.
did you have those things and then write them out? Or did you have the story planned and you knew that those, because you're really laying out the major themes of the book in the first 4 pages.
Right, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was going to be the beginning of the book either. I never write anything from beginning to end.
Really?
Ever. I don't write anything from beginning to end.
I always do. Every single thing, linear.
Yeah. That's great. I just can't. I just don't. I just keep making a mess. I just keep writing these little things and I just keep moving them around. And I didn't know that that would be the beginning of the story. And I can't write anything from beginning to end. I really don't. And I mean, the last page of Olive, I wrote maybe halfway through putting that book together. I wrote that last page. And I hadn't even written the story that the last page was of. And I didn't lose it. Thank God.
Because it's a really good last page.
It's a really good last page.
It's really soul-crushing and beautiful.
I wrote that last story and I thought, wait a minute. The end is somewhere here. Where is it?
Oh, my God.
So that's how I work. I don't really understand it, but that's how I work. So I didn't know that I was going to start there, and I didn't know that I was laying everything out there.
So even now, are you writing little things that you don't know where they're going to land?
Yeah, that's just all I do.
And then at what point do you think, okay, this is a book, and I'm going to start shaping the direction?
Well, there's the long period of the messiness. There's a very long period of the messy desk, messy table. Like a long period. And
like 20 years? Like after law school?
Yeah. Oh, God, yes. But eventually, then I do, eventually, if I write from some true spot in myself, if I write from something truthful and transpose it onto a character or whatever, then the pieces will begin to have some kind of pressure beneath the sentences. There will be some buoyancy. There'll be some life to them. And that's why I don't worry about plot, because plot will show itself if I'm writing from a truthful place and doing it again and again and making it all a mess, then they will eventually connect. This is what I have found to be true.
Do you ever think in terms of doing something that is frightening to you or something that will be harder because you haven't done it before?
No.
You don't think in this,
No. I don't.
That's nice. That's nice.
I guess.
Very healthy.
I mean, I don't know if it is, but I don't think in those terms. I just make the mess.
And all that other stuff. I mean, does it really go in the trash, or do you have?
Oh, it really goes in the trash.
Are there like Liz Strout archives?
Please, no, trash.
University of Texas at Houston's going to buy your papers?
No, never. It just gets thrown away. And I don't mind throwing it away. People say, well, do you ever, think that maybe you could have used it? But I don't think so, because it didn't end up at the front of the table. I don't worry about it.
Do some of those things then turn into stories these days? Short stories?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Do you write any nonfiction?
The little bit of nonfiction that I have written, I wish I had never written. And I don't plan on writing anymore. I don't like to write nonfiction.
You don't ever take a magazine assignment or that sort of thing?
Well, I did once in a while in the past when I felt that I had to, but boy, I don't like to. I don't like it at all.
All for fiction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, that really is me.
Right.
Ugh. I mean, so is my fiction. But, we get to pretend.
Let me ask you, and then we'll start taking this out to the audience, about HBO and Olive Kittredge, because I imagine that would be the first question if I said, let's open it up to questions now. So I'll spare you the trouble. How was that for you? Was that fun?
It was great. I mean, I didn't have much to do with it, but it was. First of all, I thought they did a wonderful job. Thank God. Because when I saw it, I thought, oh, this is great. And then I realized, oh my God, it might not have been. It hadn't really occurred to me. Why hadn't it occurred to me? I don't know. But I was just so pleased. I was so pleased. And I didn't really have much to do with it. I talked with Frances a number of times about Olive. I talked with Lisa, the director, once for quite a while, and I talked with Jane, the screenwriter, once for quite a while, and that was it. And then they just went and they did it. And we went to a shoot one night, and I had never been to a shoot, and it was amazing. They worked very, very, very hard.
And it's really boring.
Couldn't. It was so boring, and they worked so hard, and it was from like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and at lunchtime at 1 a.m. I said, "Oh, I'm gonna have to go, you guys. Sorry, I was so exhausted." But they were working like crazy. It was great. It was really very interesting. But otherwise, I didn't have much to do with it. But I was so pleased with it. And Richard Jenkins,
and you must have been so happy for them.
Yeah.
When they won and everything went so.
Yeah.
Did you go to the Emmys or did you watch it on TV? Or?
No, actually, we were out that night.
You were busy.
We were busy.
Were you out the night that it came on HBO?
No.
We
watched that.
Did you watch it on television, or did you?
No, we did.
It before?
They gave us a private screening of it ahead of time, and that was fun. That was really fun. And then we did watch it on HBO.
So you won a Pulitzer, and you had your HBO movie that won all of those Emmys, and then you debuted at #1.
I know. It's just
what's left, Liz?
It's too much.
What's left?
I don't know. It's a lot. It's not easy, you guys. It is. God, it's so obnoxious.
But you really managed to stay out of it.
I did.
With great dignity. You're kind of off, quietly living your life, doing your work.
I am, actually. You're right. I'm not part of any scene. I'm sorry. It's just I'm so not.
But you're really. But there's a lot of dignity in how you're conducting yourself.
Thank you.
Miss.
Well, thank you.
Because I can think of some people who aren't doing that great of a job.
Well,
on the dignity front.
Well, it's just. Thank you.
Would you guys like to ask some questions? Just to make it sort of a group event? Karen.
So you were talking about these notes that you put in the waistband. Well, what about the notes on Lucy that you kept on the desk all this time? Why did you keep those, and why didn't they go in the door?
Exactly. I've wondered that. I really have wondered that. Because I thought that was what was going to happen. And I think the reason it didn't happen, honestly, truthfully, I don't know. But let's pretend I do know. And I think that I do think her voice got to me. And that's why. That's why she kept showing up. And that's why she won me over. Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't even remember the other ones that went in the garbage now.
It's the way life works.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you don't start writing from the beginning. So
Right.
where did your story start then?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right.
Also with Olive, I'd be interested to know
Well, with
the
Olive,
beginning was for you.
I can remember the very first time Olive came to me. I can remember I was in the kitchen and I was loading the dishwasher and I had this image of this large woman. She just showed up. It was fabulous. This large woman standing by the picnic table at her son's wedding, and I could hear inside herself saying, "It's high time everybody goes home." And I thought, oh my God, and I went right down, I wrote that right down, and that was how Olive showed up. And I do remember that. The very first time she showed up, but I don't remember what scene Lucy first appeared in, but I think it was one with her mother. I think it was in the hospital with her mother. But I'm not sure, but I think so. One of those many different scenes. Yeah.
Claudia? Sorry.
Did you, what?
Oh.
Well, no, I was just wondering, so from there, your story just kind of
you started thinking about the character and your story came around?
Well, I would. What I do is every time I sit down to work, I will take whatever emotion is most urgent in myself, and I will transpose it onto a character. And I would tell my students, there's always something that's most forefront in our minds, or there's something that's tugging at us more than something else all the time. And it could just be, is the babysitter taking care of the kids right? Or it could be, is my husband having an affair? Or
with the babysitter.
With a babysitter.
Right.
Or it could be, where am I going to get the money for that? Or it could be, oh man, I hope I remember to buy the milk. I mean, something is always the most in our mind. And if I can take that and transpose it, make it something completely different, but use that energy of that, that's what I've learned over the years to do. And then I will, I'll make Lucy feel something that, comes from that. You see what I'm saying? And then, or her mother or something. And then I'll just keep collecting them and collecting them and collecting them. And then it will show itself eventually.
So your storyline and your characters really just come from your imagination and all from it's not ever based on current events or actual people, even loosely?
The Burgess Boys was very much based on a current event. I mean, there really was a person in Lewiston, Maine who threw a pig's head through a mosque in the Somali community. That was very much based on that event. I fictionalized, I made it completely up, but I was very interested in that and did tons of research about the Somali community and about that situation and all that kind of stuff. So I do, I will use, but, I will use anything that comes my way. And I have always listened a lot. I listen all the time. And as Jim Burgess says, people are always telling you who they are. They don't know that they are, but it's just interesting. And so I listen a lot. And, I'll ride the subway or the bus and I'll just listen to people. And it's just fabulous. It's just wonderful. Because people are so interesting, and then, I make the rest up. But I will use parts of people I've known, maybe, or parts of myself, So it's kind of like a dream. How when you have a dream and you think, where did those orange bathing shorts come from in that dream? But they came from somewhere. You might have seen it 10 years earlier or something. You don't know.
Do you want to call on them?
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Well, you said earlier that you don't judge, and it's like Olive. Did Olive ever do anything that surprised you?
Yes, she did. Oh my goodness, she did. When she took that bra from her daughter-in-law's drawer, I was amazed. I was amazed.
I haven't read Lucy Barton yet, but I guess, how about Lucy? Did she do something that has surprised you? I mean,
yeah.
Fictional characters, you're making this up.
I'm making it up, and yet,
Like, oh
yeah.
my God, I gotta write this down.
Exactly. It's a funny thing because there are people that will say, well, the characters just take on a life of their own and write themselves or something. I'm not one of those people. Like, I know all the time that I'm making them up.
I would go in when I was working on this last book in the morning and look at my computer and say, you damn lazy novel, why don't you write yourself the way those other writers' novels just write themselves?
Right, exactly. That's funny. That's funny. But yeah, I mean, but I always know that I know that I'm the one who's doing it. At the same time, there should always be a little surprise, I think, because it's just good for the work. And I really was surprised when Olive took that bra. I mean, I remember, I had her over there by, looking at the stain, the Vicks stain on the bureau, and then I had her open it up, and I thought, hey, go for it. And it was such a fun day at work, I'll tell you. That was a great day at work. And I will also tell you this, folks. there are so many people that come up to me and they go, "How did you know?" Just telling you.
Seriously?
Just telling you.
Wow. Yes.
Anyway.
So I wanted to ask, we've decided it might have been like 16 years or something that you worked.
Yeah.
So what was that journey like, and what was the turning point?
You know, it was a long, long haul, and I just kept writing and writing, and I got a few stories published here and there, but it was a really long haul, and I began to understand that there was something that was not working in my work. I thought, why, you know, I'm working at this so hard, why is it not happening? And I thought to myself, there must be something untruthful about what I'm doing, because it just seemed to me that I wasn't telling the truth. And I thought I was telling the truth, but I got fixated on the idea that there must be something I wasn't being truthful about. And so I took a stand-up comedy class. It almost killed me, it really did. But I took it because I thought to myself, we laugh at things because they're true. That was my theory. And so I thought, what would happen if I was, you know, in front of people and I was in a pressure cooker situation and I was supposed to make them laugh? What would come out of my mouth? That's what I was interested in it. So I took this class. It was so frightening. It was just terrifying. But I stuck it out, and then I had to perform for the final exam at a comedy club in New York City. Oh my God, that was so frightening. But I did it, and it worked. My instinct was right, because what happened as I did this for however many weeks it was, 13, 14-week course, I began to realize that I was making jokes about myself as being an uptight New England woman. And honest to God, I didn't know I was from New England. I mean, I just didn't know it, because I was so from New England. I didn't know I was from New England. Do you see what I mean? I just didn't get it. And so then I began to realize, okay, so I'm from New England. And then I had all these jokes about hair, which I just am too embarrassed to go into, but I did have hair issues. And then I wrote Amy and Isabel, which is about a very uptight New England woman, and there's hair. And so I think, you know, it was probably worth a few years that took off my life.
I want to just roll back the tape for this entire evening and start here, and then go forward, knowing that you took this comedy
Oh my
class.
God, it was horrifying.
But it's so fascinating.
It was so frightening. But I was right. But my instinct was right. That's what gets me, is that I understood that there was something that needed, and I found it. It was so interesting.
When I look back over my education, I think if I had it all to do again, I would probably take nothing but acting classes.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing that I need the most, both in writing and creating characters, but also in doing this and being on stage. So did it help you? I mean, I understand how it helped you in your writing, but does it help you this? Does it help you?
No, my God.
I mean, being a public self, where you have to put on some sort of a persona and go out and perform.
And it was so frightening. It was years ago.
But it seems like it was just yesterday.
It was just so frightening.
Was it as frightening as being a lawyer and going up in front of the judge, or was it a similar sort of frightening?
That's a good question. They were both horrifying. They were both horrifying.
You were just a girl who was meant to stay at home
I
in
was.
a room
You're
and
exactly
type.
right. You're exactly right. Right by hand. I'm a girl who...
I'm so glad you asked that question and got that answer. That was amazing. Yes.
You left a lot unsaid.
Yeah.
I
In
want to
Lucy
know
Barton.
what the thing
You're
was.
ta- oh,
I
the
want to
thing.
know why
Yeah.
she was in the truck.
Yeah.
I wanted the book
Yeah.
to go on and
Yeah.
on. And I guess that's the genius of writing, is leaving us wanting to know more.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, yeah. The way I saw it, I again, like I said, I've said so many times, her voice, but I pictured a thumbprint. You know, I thought, I'm just going to lightly put a thumbprint on the canvas for the thing, and and the truck and these different. I'm just going to put a light thumbprint because that's how Lucy would tell her story. So that was the image I had.
And can I also say, I read this book, how long ago would I have read it? If I read it when The Galley first came out, 4 months ago?
I don't know. I
5?
don't do time very well.
Somewhere between 6 and 4 months ago, I read this. And I just read it again today, really fast, because I found out that I was going to be doing this tonight. Read it again. Wait, give yourself some time, read it again, because a lot of those things seemed clear to me. And those sentences that I read, about the cornfield, and I just thought, I made a lot of connections that I didn't make the first time. And there are not very many books there are books that I love passionately, but I would never say, read this again. Because really, if you didn't get it the first time, But read this one later. Yeah. Yes?
Is there anything bad about winning a Pulitzer Prize?
Wait a minute, who asked me that? Where? Oh, there you are.
I really like that question.
No. I lost a couple friends.
That's sad.
It's very sad. I lost probably 2 friends. I assume because they were jealous.
Wow.
And that made me very sad. But that's the way it is.
What was the best thing about it?
The best thing was I got a lot more readers to read Olive and then to read other stuff. Yeah. And then I met my husband because he came to an event for Olive. And that's when I lost my friend.
Yeah, she could take the Pulitzer, but the really swell husband, that's too much.
She said, you won a Pulitzer and you met your husband. It was just too much. She said that.
Wow.
Anyway.
Bye, friend.
Whatever. But, yeah. No, there's nothing bad about it.
Okay, there are 2 of you, so
Yes.
let's start here and then we'll go there. You first?
Well, in talking about the 2 points that were made about putting yourself in a situation where you would tell the truth.
Yeah.
One of the things about Lucy's voice I love the most are these gentle slips of these doubts that she has about
Right.
remembering.
Right.
And I wonder, in connection also with Sarah Payne, who's saying, this writer, whose people say she stays away from you. I'm curious for you, as somebody particularly who didn't work necessarily as a third person or a
Right.
first person all the time, was that something that you worked with consciously?
Right. That's a really good question, and I did. Yes, I did. And the question, as I understand it, she's talking about Lucy will qualify things. She'll say, well, I think that's what happened, but I'm not sure. Is that what you're talking about? And then Sarah Payne, and she feels that Sarah Payne's never quite getting at the truth. So I increasingly saw Lucy as somebody who was interested in the truth. She's very interested in just finding out what's true. And so for her to say, well, I think my mother kissed me, but I don't know if she ever did, or whatever she says, it's the opposite of making her an unreliable narrator. It's like making her a reliable narrator because we don't remember back 30 years. We can think we do, but we don't. And so that was my way of making Lucy be reliable and be really interested in trying to tell the reader the truth. And she does sense that Sarah Payne, who can't ever quite say her name, when she met her, couldn't quite say her name, is always staying away from something. And so by the final culmination of the book, I realized, okay, Lucy's going to take agency, and she's going to say, my name is Lucy Barton.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah, that's why she's doing that, and so she's being as honest as she can be.
It gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Second person in that area, yes.
Really curious to know about your process of throwing things away and how that developed when you were younger, and maybe did you have like a mediocre pile that you kept?
Well, I think probably most of the pile's mediocre, actually, all the time, frankly. I did write, when I was very young, I was always writing. I was always writing in notebooks, and my mother gave me notebooks, and she'd say, write down what you did today, write down what you saw today. So I just always writing, always writing stuff. And so in a way, it was never very precious to me. I mean, I was very, I knew I was a writer, but because I wrote so much, it wasn't like, oh, well, this is my work, and, it would just fly around. And it still does. And so, yes, I think a lot of it was mediocre for a very long time, and I think a lot of it remains mediocre even now. What's piled on my table is not particularly great, but there might be a little paragraph in there somewhere that will help me.
Do you ever include anybody else in the process of figuring out what's great and what's mediocre?
No, I don't, because I think that I have to work on something, and I can't talk about it. I just have to be. There's a pressure that builds. And it's a very private kind of thing that happens. And so if I talk about it, then the pressure is leaked. And what I do is I have one reader, and this book is dedicated to her.
Oh, that's nice.
I've had her for 32 years, and when I have enough of a manuscript that I no longer know what to do with, then I will give it to her, and she's my one reader, and she'd give it back to me with her little notes.
Is she your friend, or are you?
Yeah, she's a wonderful friend. But we really started off as readers for many years, and of course we became very close. But even now, I'm resistant when she sends it back, and I'll think, that's not right. And then of course, I'll think, oh, well, she's made a good point.
Yeah.
So but it's pretty private.
That's a great relationship.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
This side of the room has something. Yes.
So all these little notes, you do longhand?
Yes, I do.
And then later do you type?
I do, and then when they get messy enough or long enough that I can't read them, I will type them in, and then have them. But I like the handwritten stuff for as long as I can have it, and then when I do print it out, I'll mess it up again as quickly as I can. I just like mess. It's the truth. I've always liked mess.
We have to talk about that. One more question. Yes.
Do you have a set time that you write? Do you have a schedule every day, or?
I used to have a very strict schedule because I had, and I don't have to so much anymore. But I do have a schedule, and I do write in the morning, not early. I'm not up at 5 o'clock writing. That's not my schedule at all. But I will write in the morning, and I will write. I'll try and put lunch off as long as I can, because there's something about having lunch that breaks it for me. Mm-hmm. And then maybe later on in the afternoon I'll look at it again and fiddle around a little bit. So that's pretty much my schedule.
I've gotten so much out of this. I don't know about you guys, but this has really been such a huge pleasure for me just to hear these things. It's been so much fun. I know a lot of the people in this room, and I know you to be a kind and respectable and calm group of people. So I just want to say she just got off the plane from Seattle and has to work really late and then get up at the crack of dawn to catch a plane. So be super nice to her. And also, let's do everything we can to keep this book at #1 where it belongs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.